Right, ladies and gentlemen, can we call the meeting to order? Can I welcome you all to the March meeting of the North Northumberland Local Area Council. I am in the chair today because Councillor Castle has another engagement, so I've been asked to step in as vice chair. I will be chairing the first part of the meeting and the latter part of the meeting, and then subject to approval, I will be handing over in the middle bit to Councillor Thorne, who will chair the planning side of the meeting, and Councillor Thorne is also chair of the Strategic Planning Committee as well, so he's got plenty of experience in chairing planning meetings. The procedure at the meeting is obviously once we've got the first bit of the meeting done, we then go to the determination of planning applications. The officers will present the planning applications to members and to members of the public who are here. There will then be an opportunity for objectors, elected members and supporters of the applications will have an opportunity to speak to the committee. You will be limited to 5 minutes each. You won't be permitted to go over that 5-minute mark. So once you hear the beep, you are required to finish what you are saying. And then there will be an opportunity for members of the council to ask questions, members of the committee to ask questions, and then it will be opened up for debate. So I will get on to item 2, which is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Castle, Councillor Hardy, Councillor Clark and Councillor Seymour. Are there any other apologies to offer? No? Right, we move on to item number 3, which is the disclosure of members' interests. Isabel?
Thank you, Chair. A personal prejudicial interest in the second application, Hillcrest. I'll be speaking as ward councillor, and then I will not take part in any further debate of that or vote.
Thank you very much. Are there any other disclosure of members' interests? No. Okay. Then we move on to item number 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on Monday, the 24th of January, 2022. Do I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor Hunter?
Yes, can I say there's one typo?
Yeah.
Bottom of page 14.
Bottom of page 14.
Third last line, Scramiston. There's 2 R's in it. It's Cremerston. Just to make it upset.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I'll propose the minutes.
And do I have a seconder for those minutes? With obviously the change that Councillor Hunter has proposed. Yep, Councillor Hill. Are we all in agreement? Yep, okay. Then we move on to the determination of planning applications, which is item number 5. Before we move on to that, because in Councillor Hardy's absence, we're required to appoint a chair to chair the planning side of the meeting. So I would like to propose Councillor Trevor Thorne to chair the planning side. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Yep, all in agreement?
Agreed.
Fantastic. I am happy to hand over to Councillor Thorne, who will chair the planning side of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the planning part of our meeting this afternoon at the Area Council. Stephen has mentioned procedure. I'll just go through it again to make sure everybody's aware. As chairman, I introduce the applications, of which there are 2 this afternoon. We then invite the planning officer to present his report, give us any updates, any changes to the recommendations. We then have public speaking, 5 minutes for an objector, 5 minutes for a local member, a parish councillor or county councillor, and then 5 minutes for a supporter. Members of the plan committee can then put questions to the planning officer, and then after that we enter into the debate of that application, ask for a proposal, a seconder, and then debate the item and take a vote. So our first application this afternoon is a change of use of land for the siting of up to 60 static caravans, along with associated infrastructure, hard and soft landscaping, and that is at land northwest of Springwood, Coast View in Swarland. Our officer for this item is Tony Lowe, and Tony, I would now like to invite you to present your report, sir.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to update members on some items. First of all, I'd like to refer members to proposed condition number 2, where it refers to plans. The planting strategy drawing, instead of referring to revision P06, it should read P07. The drawings are very similar, with only small changes regarding planting to meet local flood authority concerns, and they were accepted by the county ecologist at the time. In para 8.75 and in the recommendation at 9.1, where it refers to a contribution to the Coastal Mitigation Service of £10,040, that should read £10,080. Three late representations have been received and have been circulated to members already. You should have all of those, and one of them has been handed out. It did come in very late, just in case some members didn't see it. As these were not addressed in the report after the slide presentation, I will address some of the points raised, but consultees are present to address issues relating to their individual disciplines should they be required. Mr. Chairman, site location plan. On the side that's been shown, the site is indicated by the area hatched in red, and the red line of the access cutting through the site from Leamington Lane, through the existing Perseus Caravans Park down to the hatched area, which is the site of the proposed development. Again, in aerial photograph form, the application site is in the main part of the application site is indicated by the arrow. Currently, it's the golf driving range. The site is on the open land to the east, that's to say the right of it. On the other side of what you can maybe be able to see there is a small hedgerow. There is an existing consent, an existing outline consent for residential development for 9 units. The wooded area immediately to the south is out with the development area. A slide showing that the planting strategy that is proposed, the slide itself does incorporate the improved drainage ditch as well, so you can see where the planting indicated by areas of green and the blue improved drainage ditch as it cuts through the eastern side of the site, the eastern boundary of the site on the right as you look at it. Again, the wooded area to the south is out with the boundary. That's actually land owned by Forestry England and doesn't form part of the application, of the application development area. Similar to the videos provided to members, this shows the access to the site and views along Leamington Lane, along which localised road width improvements are required and proposed. Centre one is looking towards the right of the access, and the one on the right is looking towards the left of the access. Again, just looking each side down Leamington Lane and where the improvements are required. Again, similar to the videos, these photos provide views along the access road within the site, that is to say the estate road within the caravan park, along which it's supposed to, the deliveries are supposed to be made. These two photos show on the left the wooded area, or the start of the wooded area, through which it is proposed to improve the track. On the right is across the area intended for the caravan site. At the moment, it's the driving range for the golf course, and you can just about make out in the far distance against the thick tree line there where the driving range T is, if you like, or the shelter from where they drive off. In the middle distance is the area with the existing outline consent. You can see by the change from the green to the rough grass area. And in the far distance is the existing residential development along Swarland, with the end of Springwood just visible along the centre of the scheme towards the left of where the teeing off hut is, the tee shelter is. Bear with me a second. This slide and the next slide I'd intended in the main to assist with the lead local flood authority representative, James, responding to any questions that are regarding flooding and drainage. The first slide shows two areas, pre-development flows and post-development flows. Clearly the post-development flows have shown a marked difference in the colour coverage of the site, but the detail of that will be pointed out by James. And similarly, the drainage ditch, the enlarged ditch attenuation scheme details, again, will be used by James to help go through the issues raised, or any issues raised on flooding and drainage. Mr. Chairman, whilst policies within the NOP carry significant weight at this time, the starting point in assessing development is still the current development plan, the SAID policies of the Alnwick District local plan, and the policies of the Alnwick District Local Development Framework core strategy. Some points to make on the late representations that have been received. Firstly, climate change. These points are generally dealt with by subject. That is to say that the LFA will address flooding, highways will address the need for electric vehicle charging points, for example, and ecology will consider habitat. And I considered at that time of their response, given the existing and proposed use, and such things as the proposed drainage plans and landscaping, etc., the proposal is considered acceptable in regard to climate change. In particular, with regards to drainage and flooding, this has been looked at in detail by the LLFA, and issues relating to crest heights for the proposed bund and drainage lines, as well as any potential and the impacts that can be appropriately addressed by the LFA, or their impacts can be more appropriately addressed by the LFA rep. The proposal includes some landscape planting along the eastern boundary, as well as within the site, and whilst the development will have a local visualised visual impact, an LVIA, an assessment of that visual impact, is not considered to be required for this proposal. The salient points within the policies are referred to within the report, but the policy is not quoted verbatim, and officers feel that in the planning balance, the proposal remains acceptable. The adjacent site has outlined consent for residential development. However, all matters, including layout, are reserved for later consideration. Having checked our records, I'm unaware of any submission for an application for reserved matters on that site to be submitted as yet. So the layout and where any houses on that site are going to be located have not yet been confirmed. The safety risk assessment for traffic flows is provided in the updated National Highways format. It did take some time to come through, but it is there, and it was there to address National Highways concerns and was assessed by them. National Highways set out the manual for traffic neutrality and seasonal variation, and any seasonal variation in traffic flow readings will have been considered by them in responding to the consultation, and officers of consent that has been dealt with appropriately, that any seasonal variation has been dealt with appropriately at the time. Mr. Chairman, the proposal is considered acceptable in planning terms, with technical matters assessed by consultees and conditions recommended where appropriate. The proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the Section 106 agreement, as they're amended by the briefing today. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to that portion of the meeting that's assigned to public speaking. Harvey Ems, the agent, there was some confusion over his slot, but with the chairman's permission, I am happy that the agent speaks in the slot allocated to him. So we've got three speakers this afternoon. We've got an objector, Jackie Stent. We've got a representative from the Parish Council, Suzanne Stanley. And then in support of the application, we've got Harvey Ems, the agent. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Jackie Stent to speak in support, in objection to the application for no more than 5 minutes. Jackie, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Jackie Stent and I'm representing the residents of Swarland. We are quite appalled that our objections to this application, over 140 of them, have been dismissed, it seems, in the Planning Officer's report. The Alnwick Core Strategy and the Northumberland Local Plan describe Swarland as a sustainable village centre and a service village. We have a school in Swarland, cafe, playground, village hall and club. No restaurant, no church, no pub. The full-time shop and post office closed several years ago. There's no public transport. The report states that the nearest bus service stops 2 miles away and is not accessible on foot. So tourists are dependent on their private cars to get to local attractions and amenities. More caravans means more cars, hardly environmentally friendly. There will be more traffic on roads like Leamington Lane, the only entrance to the caravan site. Residents have already noted that speed limits are not always adhered to, and visitors looking for the site have got lost in the village despite the better signage. It is stated that the development is self-contained within the existing golf course and holiday park, yet the proposed site is nowhere near the other caravans and lodges already on site. It is on the periphery of the golf course with inadequate screening now or planned. Caravans are not being added to the caravan park. They are being sited on part of the golf course, setting the precedent of converting the remainder of the golf course into a caravan park. The report states that the distances to existing and planned housing to the east of the application are acceptable. We dispute this. Our other authoritative evidence shows distances are as small as 14 metres. Proposed screening plans on the eastern boundary are indistinct and non-existent on the southern side of the boundary. In the report, the applicant has not yet decided who will supply the caravans, so we have no idea what they will look like in terms of design, colour or size. The design and layout plan submitted does not show how the elevation of the land increases towards the west and gives no idea of the extra visual impact of the caravans to be sited there. An LVIA is down to the professional judgment of the planning officer, who this time has decided it is not essential, even though we have no idea of what the caravans are actually going to look like. I wonder if you would agree with that if it was a housing development that was going up and you had no idea what the houses looked like. Planning policies state clearly the need to reduce CO2 emissions. So apart from appearance, how environmentally friendly will these caravans be? What will the thermal efficiency be? What fuel will be their heating? How many electric car charging points are to be installed? The drainage, sewerage and flooding is a huge problem in Swarland. Last year, a resident's garden was flooded with sewerage. Plants and vegetables were lost. Imagine the anxiety she still has over this happening again. The Tweed Mill area has also suffered from flooding, made worse by illegal ditches constructed by the former owners of the golf club. Northumberland Water did admit to an operational issue, but they still do not think there will be an issue with the extra caravans on site. I have received information from those with some expertise in this area, showing that the flooding risk associated with the extra caravans is still high. For example, the flood risk assessment for this application only covers the 2.5 hectare site, concluding a bund width of 300 millimetres to be necessary. The flood risk assessment for the land to the east of the site included land from the west where the ground flow water flows, a total of 17 hectares, concluding a bund width of 1.5 metres to be necessary. It seems that the current FRI for this application does not take into account groundwater draining from the land to the west of the site. Planning policies state that development should reduce the risk of flooding. Plans which simply maintain the current flood risk are short-sighted and unacceptable. Consideration must be given to the long-term solution. After receiving the planning officer's report, several documents were submitted to committee members, including one from a solicitor, giving full details of some of the errors and omissions in the report itself. The current incomplete application fails to comply with many of the key strategies of the Northumberland plan. Members were also sent a document illustrating how proper landscaping and screening could improve the environment and reduce the flood risk. There are alternative solutions to this, which will, I think, allow an increase in the number of accommodations, caravans or whatever, on the caravan park, but will not have such a negative visual and environmental impact of the current application. Thank you for listening.
Very much, Jackie. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Suzanne Stanley to speak. Suzanne, over to you.
Thank you. Newton-on-the-Moor and Swarland Parish Council objects to this application in its current form on the basis that We're concerned that the proposed site is immediately outside the new Northumberland local plan settlement boundary for Swarland. If NCC is so readily prepared to permit developments immediately outside such boundaries, we wonder what is the point of them. Given that there is a presumption in the NLP that brownfield sites should take priority over greenfield, we ask whether the current footprint of the caravan site area is already fully occupied with caravans, or whether there is scope to use the existing caravan area more efficiently to accommodate the additional 60 planned units. Further to our concerns over location, we challenge the assertion that the development will, quote, relate well to the existing urban form of Swarland, close quotes. The current caravans and lodges on the holiday park are, and always have been, separate and distinct from the village, as aerial views and the applicant's plans show. This new addition intrudes on the existing long-established community and merges holiday accommodation with regular housing. In addition, though the officer's report states that spacing is adequate, the planned site appears to be of a much higher density than the rest of the holiday park. Though it may meet criteria for the expansion of an existing business and adding to provision for tourism, neither of which we object to per se, it should not be at an inevitable cost to the established community. We strongly argue that there should be substantial provision of green space between village settlements and open countryside developments or other permitted developments outside settlement boundaries. Despite positive assertions in the planning officer's report, we strongly emphasise the inappropriateness of 60 holiday lets so close to existing and planned houses. We know that short-stay holidaymakers do not feel the same responsibility or commitment towards the local community as do permanent on-site owners. Therefore, the noise of holidaymakers simply enjoying themselves in various ways is more likely to be an issue. On the basis that Swarland is a very quiet village, normally free from noisy neighbour issues, we disagree with the officer's suggestion that the noise won't be inconsistent with that already experienced by owners of existing residential dwellings. Over the last 2 to 3 years, the PC has received complaints from residents about noise. A number of caravan owners on the main site have been subletting their units as short-term holiday lets, and this has generated disturbance from some of those holiday makers. For example, noisy music or rowdy behaviour while they return on foot from a bar now situated in the old golf club house on Coast View. We'd also argue that there's no shortage of similar developments in this immediate area, and we question the need for further such development in Swarland. We have no confidence that the proposed arrangements for both foul and surface water will be adequate. We strongly challenge NWL's statement that they have, quote, no issues with the proposed arrangements. NWL has a long history of underestimating the capacity of the existing, already overloaded drainage network, resulting, as NWL frontline workers know only too well, in frequent blockages, foul water overflows onto residential properties, and discharge of foul water over public footpaths in Viner Park. This insupportable situation is likely to be exacerbated by increased demand. Given that I have here a letter from Alnwick District Council in 2006 to Newton-on-the-Moor and Swarland Parish Council, from the then Enforcement Officer Derek Redman, apologising for the Council's regrettable oversight in failing to put a cap on the number of caravans allowed on this site, and referring to the very unfortunate planning decision, I think NCC owes it to our community to be accommodating for our very strong concerns about this proposed development, which is causing so much disquiet among so many residents. We would ask that you reconsider the recommendation of approval, otherwise this irreversible decision will adversely affect our well-established quiet community into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, speaking in support of the application, I'd like to invite Harvey Ems.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Members will have read the Comprehensive Officer Report. In terms of engagement, you will see that the application has been submitted for over 2 years now, and there's been a series of meetings with the parish council, residents and the adjacent landowner to discuss the shape and form of this development over a considerable period of time. I think I'd just like to re-emphasise that there has been already mention about alternative schemes and other opportunities. I think the critical issue for you as a committee is that you're considering this application, not other applications or what might be. That's very important in terms of planning case law, that is the case. In terms of the report, it's comprehensive in terms of it's the way it's set out in terms of addressing all the material planning considerations that you need to take into account. With particular regard to drainage, this has been an issue for some time, as we all know, in Swarland. I appreciate the residents' concerns about drainage, but that comment around illegal drains isn't actually factually correct. There is a right of access and connection through the drains that was discussed and agreed with Northumberland Water 5 years ago. There is a legal right to connect through those existing pipeworks. The drainage scheme, as proposed through this planning application in front of you today, actually provides betterment in flood and drainage terms. So comments relating to the fact that there are issues in the area, which I appreciate there has been long-standing issues, this scheme actually provides localised betterment in terms of drainage into the network, and that's been confirmed through Northumberland Water and the Flood Authority. In terms of highways, I appreciate again there's issues being raised by the consultation process around access egress. We've had long-standing discussions with National Highways relating to the trunk road connections, which have now been withdrawn. The local highway authority, we've had a number of discussions with them around improved access to the main gates. And I'd point out the access to this Caravans extension is actually through the main gates again. So we have picked up the requirements to provide some selective widening improvements, which are picked up through a proposed legal agreement. The issues relating to ecology have all been picked up and accepted, particularly with the off-site contribution and working with your local ecologists relating to great crested newts, and other issues relating to ecology have all been accepted and can be controlled via condition. The landscape point that's been picked up, there is a proposal and an agreed landscape strategy as seen before you, which sets out a detailed strategy for improving the landscape margin adjacent to the planning approval that's been outlined, which has been confirmed. There is no reserve matters application so far. We have met with the owner a couple of times now to discuss how we could work together, given effectively there are controlling conditions on that consent which relate to the operation of the golf driving range and how that interfaces with those proposed 9 houses. So the principle of the use is accepted by officers, and it's clear in the report. We have clarified the issues of land title, that I think was another point that was raised in the report too, saying that we do control the land, and we have talked to the Forestry Commission, and we will continue to do so, about implications for what is a really good and ecological beneficial wildlife area. There are no supportable planning reasons to reject this scheme in front of you today. The statutory consultees have no objections to the scheme, so there is strong support in planning policy terms for tourism and expansion of tourism on this site in both the current adopted local plan and the soon-to-be adopted Northumberland plan, including the National Planning Policy Framework 2, which seeks to endorse diversification and intensification of leisure uses in the countryside. So that's all that's remaining for me, is to endorse the officer report and recommendations to this committee this afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to question time of the officers, and as the local member, I'd like to ask the first question. And the first question is to James about drainage, flooding, sewerage. We've heard from our 2 speakers from Swarland about the devastating events that have happened in the past. You know, regular outlets of sewerage over gardens, and the flooding situation at the old Tweed Mill site has been well documented, and we've seen photos of that in the past. You know, do you think we've got it right here? Obviously, the topography of the land falls down from Leamington Lane, Overgrass Farm, down towards the village, and naturally that's the way the water flows. But yes, with any application, we always look not to make that problem worse. And, you know, my question to you today is, you know, with this latest application, do you think we've got the flooding and sewerage problem sorted?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So probably the best thing to do is to sort of detail a little bit in terms of the existing situation, the mitigation proposed, and how that it will, in a sense, not make the situation any worse. So, yeah, Tony has put up a slide on there. So this is some modelling which has been undertaken as part of the flood risk assessment. So the slide on the left shows the current situation in 100-year plus a 40% climate change event. And what's not quite clear on there, the actual development site is where the sort of the darker green blob is, sort of to the right, sort of to the east within there. And so you can see that's where the sort of main sort of surface water will pool, and also to the east, which is the land that Tony explained has the outline permission for the 9 houses. So we looked at the pre-development flows and then compare them to the post-development flows, which incorporates the mitigation measure, which is to enlarge the existing ditch which is there. So there's a ditch which runs along the eastern perimeter of the site. It's currently about 1 metre, 1.5 metres wide at the top, and it's going to enlarge to 5 metres up to 7 metres in place as well for its duration. And through the modelling, you can see that the sort of depths within the site itself have been sort of restricted to the proposed highways and also to the ditch, but also to the east as well. And I think that's the important part, is you can see with the ditch and with the bund that's in place, the flows which are in the outline application there will be reduced as a consequence. So with the mitigation measures, the waters that come from the site and further from the west will be collected and then will pool in this area and then will slowly be released back into the existing system. And if you just do the next slide, please, Tony. Thank you. So yeah, this just illustrates a little bit better the proposals. So I don't know if you can quite make out from the screen there, but the cross section to the right there is through the extended ditch, and you can see there's a couple of lines. There's a blue line and a red line on there, and you can see the mound, which is the triangle essentially to the top right. So there is a bit of difference as well. So the top level in red, that's the 100-year plus climate change event. And then top of the mound, so that's going to be 500 millimetres, so a metre difference. So there's a bit of buffer in there as well, just to accommodate the sort of intolerances within the modelling. So in summary, we are sort of content with the mitigation put forward within the flood risk assessment. We've got a number of conditions stipulated within the report as well, which ensure that certain things will be done and further information to be provided. But in summary, we are content that the measures put forward will not increase the risk of flooding any further.
Thank you, James. I've got a question, first of all, from Jeff, and then another one from Stephen. Jeff, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the officers. The relationship to this, to the local plan. I heard the person saying that it was 2 years ago that this application was first received. What does the bearing have the local plan that about to instigate now? What bearing does that have on it? And would this contravene anything in the local plan?
It has been in for 2 years. The emerging local plan, as set out in the report, still carries significant weight, but the policies are still, the development plan policies are still those of the former Annick district for this site. Both policies, both the emerging plan and the former Annick district, when weighed up, the planning balance would still fall within this proposal being acceptable to the policies that are set out in all those documents, be it one or the other. And when viewed together, again, they are viewed in the planning balance to be acceptable for the site. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. That's clear to me.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got two questions. The first one, given that we've got one of our most diligent ecologists with us today, I'm going to make use of that. On page 34, 8.46, it says, in terms of on-site ecological issues, the key issues are the impact of the development on great-crested newts, bats and nesting birds, given the nature of the site and location. The Council's ecologist has advised that the impact on these species can be mitigated by way of planning conditions. When we turn to page 44, it outlines what some of those, at the bottom of page 44, it outlines what some of those conditions are. And one of them is the creation of new amphibian pools and features will be created. And I'm looking for Anne to give me some direction on here, because I'm presuming that the great crested newt in particular has taken up residence there because the environment is suitable to it. How do we know that if we move them into these new pools, because they don't take up residence everywhere, it's got to be pretty good circumstances for them to take up. How do we know they're going to take up residence in these new pools? And then I've got a second question, which is for the planning officers. On page 49, it mentions the development shall be implemented and occupied in accordance with the following, and it lists in terms of how the caravans will be occupied. Will these caravans be under the 11-month scheme where they have to be? What is the in terms of how long can they be occupied? What's the time period on them being occupied? Because the reason I ask it. Certainly in the area that I represent, there are sites where there are ways to get around those types of conditions by putting down your permanent address as another family member that lives, say, elsewhere within the county, occupying it for 11 months of the year, then renting out a holiday let in the village for 4 months, but you don't pay any council tax, but you're still using many of the services that are within the community, but not paying anything towards it. So I'm keen to know what, in terms of time thresholds, are these going to be occupied as well? Thank you.
Okay, so to begin with, great crested newts. There are no breeding ponds being directly impacted. So it's just the terrestrial habitat, which is where newts are when they're feeding or when they're not breeding. The site will be under a licence, so any work on the site will be supervised by an ecologist under licence by Natural England. So there's very little risk of there being any harm to individual newts. The habitat that's within the red line boundary isn't really suitable for newts because it's amenity grassland. There's a little bit of woodland which would be suitable for them and some longer grass, which again has been identified as being something that would require supervision. So the ponds that are being created by way of enhancement rather than by full direct mitigation of the impacts. And we don't know whether they're going to move in because all wildlife is incredibly difficult to predict.
Mr. Chairman, in answer to the second question, yeah, condition 32 it does set out the fact that the caravans are to be occupied for holiday purposes only, and it's that condition that is going to control or enable that occupation to be controlled, and it does specifically set out that it should not be the person's sole or main residence, and that the addresses of those sole and main residences should be kept on site and can be checked by enforcement officers when required. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my apologies. Also, there's no intention to restrict that to 11 months of the year. It would be 12 months of the year.
All right. Georgina, question.
Thank you. I've got a few, but they might be raised by others. So I'm just going to concentrate on one, and it's to give us a guide for considering the issue of visual amenity. I think the policy and guidelines for this whole area, which is going to come more and more regarding caravans, the issue is that I know some things like wind turbines, people have a different view, but I don't think anyone can honestly say that caravans are attractive. Sometimes the internal is, and you sometimes get nice verandas, but the utilitarian, they're not attractive. They're tin pots in the countryside. So given the location and generally, what guidance can you give us regarding the issue of visual amenity?
Mr. Chairman, the visual amenity. I suppose when looking out the back, or looking at that site, in fact looking at that site in aerial form, in plan form, you can see that the caravans will sit and rest against what is an existing small area, wooded area, to the west, to their rear, as you look at it from the existing development in Swarland, to the north and to the south. And because of the existing development in Swarland, the wider views on visual amenity will be contained within that area, and it will not spread much beyond. They will go beyond, but not much. They will be screened to some effect. In addition, the proposed screening will over time affect the visual amenity as well, as it matures, as it grows, as it sets in, both within and on the boundary of the site, and will again reduce the impact on visual amenity. When it comes to the style and the colour, and I know, I think remember being because the highly reflective colours essentially caravans, and do have a visual impact, particularly when the sun hits them. The idea of the condition is that can be controlled. Both the external appearance, the colour scheme, if it's going to be painted, can be controlled to minimise that impact as much as possible. It might mean that a matte finish is sought. It might be that there's a wooden finish on the caravans. It might be that it's a green paintwork as opposed to a bright blue or orange caravan that moves onto the site. But that would be in accordance with the scheme to be submitted and considered at the time that condition is sought to be discharged.
Can I just come back? So, just from a general policy, because if we were talking about housing, we'd be talking about the visual amenity, and people could say they object to the design. Is it just something that we have to accept, that these ugly things are? Is it just part planning? It's just tough, and we'll maybe try to disguise them best we can, and the gloss and the finish and the paintwork. But we just have to accept that these things that are not visually attractive are just, we can't do anything about it. We can't weigh up in the way that we would about houses.
Mr. Chairman, it's fair to say that what people find visually attractive or unattractive can be subjective. Some people like caravans, some people don't. But yes, a caravan is a caravan, and it's going to be a caravan when it goes onto that site. And what we can do, and what we've sought to do, what's being proposed by the applicant, is elements of boundary screening, is elements of screening within the site, minor elements of within the site as well, but also the external edge prevents that visual amenity, that visual impact, if you like, spreading beyond the site, or too far beyond the site. But it will go beyond the site. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions on sustainability, really. Firstly, sustainability of the location for obviously 60 caravans. Now, we always get into this discussion when we're talking about caravans of how we differentiate those from kind of 60 holiday lets or 60 houses, if you like. But as we all know, the tourist season is extending, almost wrapping all the way around the year now in Northumberland. So my first question is, it's in the report that the nearest bus stop is 2 miles from the site. Now, if I was going on holiday and I had to carry all my luggage 2 miles from the bus stop to the place I was staying, I would think carefully about it. I'm wondering whether there's any mitigation that the owners of the site are making to be able to pick people up from bus stop, from railway station, so that they don't have to take their car to the site. That's my first question. Second one is on the basis that, as most of us probably realise, the answer to the first question is that most people will travel to this site by car. If we were considering a housing application, we would be asking for EV charging points on each and every house now, I believe. certainly that's the emerging policy coming forward. I don't see that there's anything on EV charging points on this site. And thirdly, in terms of come back my earlier point about these caravans being occupied for most of the year, I don't think that the thermal envelope, if you like, of a caravan is as great as that on a house or a holiday let, which would be under building regs. If this was a site which was off the gas grid, we'd be requiring, I think now, something like heat pumps to heat the buildings, because it wouldn't be sustainable on bottled gas or tank gas. So I just wonder what officers' view is on that, and how we are approaching that, being as we're talking about 60 caravans on this site.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any arrangements for pick-up by the site owners for visitors that may turn up at a bus stop. People would have to walk if they turn up at a bus stop, and that bus stop is some distance away, or get a taxi, or make alternative arrangements. But I'm not aware of any. That's not to say that they couldn't call the site and ask for it. I don't know. I'm just not aware of it. The thermal envelope for caravans. The thermal envelope for caravans, there is set out to do with caravans a list of criteria by which they can be, and I'm going to use the words winterised and non-winterised, whereby you should be able to reach a certain level of heat within so many minutes of turning on the heating, thereby indicating the type of insulation that goes onto that caravan. I don't know what it would be for this caravan. Generally speaking, it would be a purchaser's choice, I believe, for caravans that goes on. I'm not aware of anything in building regulations that would require it to be a given thermal standard, if that makes sense. However, I would say that if it is that cold in January in Northumberland, and people may not want to be staying there anyway, but that's, you know, that is a personal choice, and then they would require additional heating to go on if that caravan was not winterised or insulated in some way. Although I think it's fair to say that all caravans are insulated to a given standard, whatever that industry standard may be. When it comes to electrical vehicle car charging points, again, I'm not aware of anything that's set out as a requirement for any given number of caravans that so many should be required, but I'd defer to highways on that one. But I'm not aware of any requirement that could be imposed on that.
Thank you. Question from Isabel.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. Could there be a condition put on for noise? Because I know in some caravan sites across the country there's sort of no noise after, say, 10 o'clock at night. Just wondered if that could be a condition that might help with some of the residents' fears. And also it's mentioned in a lot of the responses from residents about hot tubs, so it's more to James as to does he feel there would be any more effect on it if there's weekly changeovers or holiday lets and the discharge of hot tubs, because a lot of people now seem to like to go on holiday where there's hot tubs on site.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not too sure how we could, and again, I would defer to Gary in public protection about how, you know, how to phrase a condition to noise. I'm not too sure how we would phrase a condition to say that there can't be noise of an evening. There will be noise of an evening. I'm sure there's noise from the existing residential development and the existing caravan park development at the moment. How we would limit that and make that enforceable on the site, I don't know. I mean, we could consider a condition to the effect that there should be no amplified external music or similar, if members should choose to do that. I would have to defer to Gary about how we could. We'd have to set specific parameters to control that noise at the periphery of the site. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Chair, I think some of this might be already picked up by the caravan licence that the park operates under. I think there's a requirement to manage noise through that. And I think, having spoken to the site manager, and they do have a curfew between 10 and 8 in the morning, which they enforce. Obviously, if it was something that escalated or was persistent, then it might come back to environmental protection for nuisance investigation. But I think that is picked up somewhat by the caravan licence that the site rules.
Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Chair, I was asking about the one for hot tubs, if James felt that would have any further effect.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So certainly from a surface water perspective, it won't have any effect in terms of that there. From a foul water one, that's certainly something that Northumberland Water would look at as part of their correspondence. And I'm sure that, the hot tubs and going into the water, additional water going into their system would have been incorporated within their response. And Tony, I'm sure, can just back me up in terms of saying that they had no objection to the scheme as part of our correspondence. So sort of separating the two out, we're perfectly fine from a surface water flooding perspective, and Northumberland Water from air correspondence as well are okay too.
Martin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In regards to the issue of the settlement boundary of the village, I would just like a little bit more explanation from officers, if it's possible, as to how it's obviously it's being viewed as acceptable outside of the settlement boundary. It's an area which is obviously slightly dislocated from the main part of the caravan park, and it's right hard up adjacent to the village, on the outside, presumably on the outside of the settlement boundary, although I haven't got that on my map, but I presume it runs down the side of this site. So just how that is viewed, because obviously if we were talking about housing, it would be probably viewed differently. So how is that considered?
Mr. Chairman, paragraph 84 of the MPF indicates that we should be supporting rural businesses. Paragraph 85, I think 84, would indicate that we would have to accept that in rural areas, sites for tourism maybe have to be found either out with or immediately adjacent to or outside settlements. So there is support in current policy, in national policy, for that siting. And again, because of the relationship between the existing development and the ground and Swarland as it exists, the shape of Swarland as it exists, I think officers would confirm that it is acceptable on that site. It's a contained, if you like, environment as much as such things can be contained, although the site does elevate going up towards the west. It's as contained as it can be. So that would relate very well to the existing settlement boundary, for cognizance of the fact that we should be looking, or we may need to look outside or adjacent to existing settlements to enable those rural businesses to expand. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Tony, I'm just wondering if you could tell us how many static caravans are on Percy Wood as it stands at the moment.
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't know. Oh, hang on. We've already looked at that. Apparently 444.
400.
Oh, sorry.
384.
Yeah.
384, but it will go to 444.
384 at the minute, and it's going to... Wow. Excellent. Thank you. Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Georgina. Over to you, Georgina.
Thank you. So the way I see this is there's a lot of objections and some very justifiable points. We've had correspondence. These residents are actually now making some suggestions, possibly to improve the project and mitigate some of the harm. They have obviously now at a late stage got planning and legal advice, and they are asking for us to defer it for basically further conversations and dialogue, which I think would be in the interest of justice. I mean, we always see, developers and applicants having the professional advice. very occasionally do you get people who are objecting, and I think the residents have obviously taken this advice and they've said, look, there's lots of things that we need to pick up on which could inform conditions and so on. So the best thing would be to defer it for further conversations. I think that that would be a fair and just thing to do. I don't think the caravan park would like to start off with the very bad feeling with all these households and residents nearby who, so if there is a possible meeting on the middle coming out with some suggested conditions. So my proposal on that basis would be to defer this application.
Elizabeth?
Chair, can I just ask, if Councillor Hill, what would he be proposing to, I think you've said to defer for further consultation between the applicant and residents, but for what length of period are you suggesting?
We would also need to know, Councillor Hill, exactly what subject areas that you feel aren't covered. We've got the team here today. These aren't new issues. We've spent a long time with the applicant. As we've talked about, the application has been in for 2 years. So our view is, notwithstanding the correspondence that's come in, this is a planning decision. You've got to assess it against planning policies, which we've talked you through today. So you need to be very clear why it is that we're deferring the decision and what specifically to discuss what.
Well, in my view, I'm not satisfied with all the information. I think that there's more that needs to be gone into. I think there needs to be more consultation. I think it's fair to give the residents who've now taken professional advice to have the benefit of the professional advice that the applicant has had. I think it would be in the public interest for if there could be some or potential closer meeting in the middle on this. I'll take advice on what is a normal timescale, but I don't need to be as specific as if I'm coming out with a legal argument to object to at this stage. I am proposing that we defer this, and I'm happy to what would be the normal 3 months or whatever would be a recommended one from the officers, what would be the normal timescale in this situation. But my proposal is to defer.
So there's 2 issues here, Chair. One is the timescale. So, I'm sure members will want to discuss that, and you know, it would need to be, you know, a reasonable period of time. But the second issue for all of the members to think about today is, what is it are you deferring for? What is that conversation specifically? And what are the issues that you feel today haven't been considered, discussed and talked about? We can, you know, through the discussion today, look at some of the conditions and add to those conditions. But if we're going to defer it, we need to be very clear and specific about actually what the reasons are. What is it that's absent from the papers and the discussion today that you think needs to be further discussed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would anyone like to second Georgina's recommendation to defer?
Mr. Chairman, I would be tempted, but the way it stands at the minute, I'm more inclined to refuse the application.
I mean, to be honest with you, the other reason I'm recommending deferring, because I would prefer that there's more time, more consultation on this. And in the absence of that, I'd be tempted to object. But I think, probably thinking, to be fair on both sides, and what has been asked for by the representative of the objectors, that's why I would go for deferral first. But if that's not second and voted for, then I would just vote against.
Right, well, that isn't seconded, so now we need another proposal. As the local member, I would like to move that we refuse this application.
Seconded.
I would like to move that we refuse this application, firstly on the basis of visual amenity. You know, back in the day when I was a councillor in the 1990s, I remember going to Alnwick Magistrates Court, where we were fighting against Del Greco, the owner of this caravan park at the time. He had permission for 15 caravans. And at that time, Percy Wood was a lovely place. It was just been, you know, left by the forestry. There were caravans and trees. It was very well landscaped. And we were objecting from Del Greco, increasing it from 15 to 30. We lost. And you know, what's happened since then. But, you know, I would like to object, firstly, on visual amenity. It's grown into the most enormous caravan site. And yes, as the agent says, it's just one more application of 60 caravans. But where have we come from? We come from a tiny little caravan site, and now we're proposing something over 400 caravans. And yes, our objectors from Swarland, they're telling us they're worried about the size of Percywood Caravan Park. It's a settlement of two villages. We've got the houses down in the bottom, and then up on the hill, we've got this caravan park. You know, 400 dwellings that need water, electricity, sewerage, and rightly so. You know, the objectors from Swarland start to scratch their head, and these problems of sewerage spilling out over onto the streets and the gardens in Swarland, you know, it's not to be accepted. So first of all, it's that visual amenity that really gets me. And I think this extra 60 caravans will just add to that. You know, if anyone wants to come to Long Framlington and look at how Percy Wood has been absorbed into the landscape, it hasn't. It's a great big carbuncle, especially at night. It sits on the hillside there. And, you know, any stranger, what is that over on the hill? Yes, it's Percy Wood Caravan Park. It hasn't been very well landscaped. And again, you know, I get the point that we are proposing some landscape here for these 60 caravans, but we're bringing them ever closer to the village. We're bringing them ever closer to the village in as much as they're just going to be over the fence. And yes, you know, we are providing some landscape, but what we're also doing for the first time is starting to build on the golf course itself. You know, up to this time, the caravans were sort of separated from the village by screening and trees. And yes, I get that. And, you know, I totally go down the line that Georgina's going about, is that caravans are not attractive. They're not. They're hard to assimilate into the landscape. They're hard to make look attractive. And again, you know, I'm on Swarland side here. You know, the residents of Swarland have to look on this. Yes, it was camouflaged, it was hidden before, but now it's not. And, you know, the services issue, you know, that's the residents are really worried about services, electric, about drainage, about flooding. And, you know, the point that I think Suzanne made about sustainable village. You know, here we've got a village, we call it sustainable, but it doesn't have a shop in it. You know, the shop has shut. It doesn't have any public transport, yet we're, you know, proposing yet more caravans to somewhere that's got no public transport and no shops. And again, I find it disappointing that, you know, we've got no idea of the caravans that we're getting. I always feel this is very sad. You know, we've got half the story here at planning. We have to imagine what's happening with the rest. The other thing that worries me is the short lets, the fact that, you know, these aren't caravans that are going to be for sale. They're to rent out to people, party people who want to come to Swarland to let their hair down, to get in the hot tub, have a good time. It's great to come away to these places. It's what we all need. You need to de-stress, but, you know, think about the residents in Swarland as well, just next door to a busy party palace. Now, for all those reasons, and I think there's enough there to support Refusal, it's always difficult, you know, to ask yourself, when is the caravan park big enough? And yes, there was an application back in for 214, and now it's only 60. But, you know, I worry about the future. There's a lot of other land here, and this is the first chunk of the golf course that we've really used for caravan development. And, you know, there's a lot of other land that could be used as well, but, you know, the cumulative impact of Percy Wood is enormous. And, you know, I, for one, today would just like to say, you know, I feel it's big enough, and I feel we're just tipping it over the edge here. Stephen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think you've pretty accurately summarised my thoughts on the matter. The one thing I would just like to highlight, and that was highlighted by the residents and the parish council as well, is Northumbrian water. And you see it time and time again on planning applications. No issue, no issue, no issue. And I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was for the development of the emerging local plan, was it the water cycle study we called it, where we looked at particularly foul water and sewerage treatment as part of that study. And I could give you the perfect example. Rothbury at the time was identified as having capacity for 50 or so houses extra, and then they would need to do something about it. Well, there's more being built since then, but I remember, I think his name was Les, and he turned up at Northumberland Hall because we needed someone from Northumbrian Water to defend their position. It was at one of the planning committee meetings. Yes, it's fine. Rothbury has sufficient capacity. It's not a problem at all. Northumbrian Water are busy rushing a £10 million scheme through in Rothbury to upgrade the sewerage treatment works because they're being fined by the Environment Agency at peak times for pumping the sewerage into the Coquet. Bearing in mind we're constantly told there's no issue. They even come to the planning committees and say there's sufficient capacity in the system. I don't have any faith in what Northumbrian Water put forward as part of their submission and planning proposals, and I base that on my own experience in Rothbury. So when you're telling me that there's foul water spilling across the footpaths and things, I believe you. We see it in Rothbury as well, but we're told by Northumbrian Water everything's fine, we've got sufficient capacity, and that is absolutely not the case. So I don't know whether it's worthwhile the planning department one day getting Northumbrian Water to come in and give us a presentation on how they reach these assessments, because I really don't have any confidence in how they do it, and that's one of the issues that Councillor Thorne has quite rightly pointed out in terms of services on the site. But I fully endorse everything Councillor Thorne has said, and I do think he has put forward some sufficient and succinct points with regards to refusal, and I'm happy to second that.
Chair, can I just interject at this point, just before we commence with the debate any further? Obviously, Chair, you've given quite a lot of reasons. I think I've written about 5 reasons down. Could we perhaps ask Liz to just summarise those in terms of planning grounds, perhaps just before we go any further?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yes, I've made a few notes of what I think the reasons are, and perhaps what you'd like to do is, you know, when we get to that point, delegate final wording for those reasons. So I've made a note of impact and visual amenity and the cumulative impact of the growth of the caravan park as reason number 1.
Thank you.
You then talked about services, electricity, drainage and flooding, Chair, and those reasons are grouped together, and those are ones that I want to strongly caution you against using those. I realise that you might like to refuse this application, but where we need to get to today is not to think about lots of different reasons and throw them in the mix. You need to think about very clear reasons, so that the members are very clear on what they're voting on, rather than lots of reasons. So we've got the LLFA here today to talk to you about flooding. The ecologist is here, highways officers are here. So all of those technical reasons, where we've got no objection from those consultees, we would strongly caution you against using those as reasons for refusal. We've heard from Councillor Bridget about Northumbrian Water, and I hear the concerns that you have with them. But again, we don't have that as a technical reason, and I wouldn't recommend that you use that as your reason today. And Councillor Thorne, you also mentioned about short-term lets as opposed to being residential properties. Again, it wouldn't be a material planning consideration. So I want you to rethink your reasons. If we could try and get them down to something that I think is right in planning terms. And the opening of your speech, we talked about the visual amenity and the cumulative impact is possibly the right reason to go with. And I would caution against all the other reasons that you have listed. So over to you, Chair, to have a think about that and your proposer. When you have done that, then I would like to come back to you and address you on the visual amenity and the cumulative impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Georgina.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an important point. I was making a general point as well, but when it comes to response from consultees, I mean, often you get the feeling it's just somebody trying to quickly get through their inbox and they're saying, I don't really have a comment. And it's almost like, oh, look, Northumberland Water or the ecologist or whoever isn't. I think sometimes a lot of weight is just somebody's workload and they haven't bothered to comment. Doesn't mean they endorse it and they've gone into it in you know, great fine detail. And the second point is probably, I mean, I agree and I support Councillor Thorne's proposal to object now that deferral was not seconded. I do think we're going to have a discussion generally, because, you know, when sometimes, for example, I will vote against, say, a housing scheme, and we've had this public benefit debate, and I'll think if it was, say, maybe a hotel, the balance would have tipped, because you'd say, well, it would support the tourism and jobs and so on. Or you might say that housing development, if it was a bit smaller, it's just two-mast, or if it was a bit low, you know, you can sometimes sort of frame it and think, I know what would have made it acceptable, I know what would have made it unacceptable. With this whole area, it's difficult. I know you just have to look at what's in front of you, but I'm just kind of thinking where I would picture it, where a kind of line where that would be okay and that wouldn't. So I think we need to have a general discussion. Maybe policy needs to develop, because we certainly, I know in my patch, I know elsewhere in Northumberland, is going to be more and more of these type of applications.
Any more comment from members?
Chair, could we just narrow down what your reasons for refusal are, first of all, so that as we go into conversations from members, they, you know, we know what they're addressing.
Well, definitely visual amenity and the cumulative impact. But you see, I think that relates to services to the village. And, you know, again, we haven't talked about this, but obviously there was an illegal connection from Percy Wood into the domestic sewerage system of a house in Swarland. And now I believe at night the sewerage is pumped out of Percy Wood during the quiet hours into that system. Well, you know, it does have an impact. You can't absorb the waste and sewerage from 440 dwellings and not have an impact on a little village. And, you know, I believe, like these two ladies say, that, you know, that's why we get the sewerage spilling out. And, you know, yes, our consultees do say everything's fine, but, you know, it isn't the position. It isn't the position that everything's okay. So I do think the services are struggling down in Swarland. If you don't want to put it in, you know, as a reason for refusal, I'm quite happy with that. But, you know, as a guy who's down on the ground, knows the Swarland people, chats to them, it's often a question I get on the doorstep about the sewers in Swarland not being able to cope. And I think they can't cope because it's a little village system and we've got a very busy caravan park, soon to be, well, maybe around about 400 caravans. It has an impact on the services, it does. And, you know, chatting to my sister-in-law last night, she was saying, oh yeah, party people, electric goes off, drainage is not very good. It's just hearsay, but, you know, that's the chat, and I do believe it. I do. I think it's real. So definitely amenity and cumulative impact.
Can I just interject? I'm stating the obvious, probably, Councillor Thorne, but it's adverse visual.
Yes, adverse visual impact.
And are you happy for the precise wording to be delegated to the Director of Planning in conjunction with yourself?
Indeed I am. But, you know, again, again, with the visual impact, I'm talking about, you know, the closeness to the residents. We have, you know, obviously I've mentioned that too. We haven't had that before. It's just on the border of the village. We haven't been there before with any of these sort of caravan developments. They've not been at the back door of the village, so to speak. They've been separate. Jeff, and then Martin. Sir.
I've listened intently to what people are saying. I just wonder, you know, this is a planning committee. It's not a scrutiny of Northumberland water. If there's a problem with Northumberland water, then we should take it up. But it's not the remit of this committee, as far as I can understand it anyway, to punish an applicant because of the inadequacies of Northumberland water. I want you all to think about that for a moment. Is it the applicant's fault that Northumberland water have been inefficient? Should we deny him something because of Northumberland water's inefficiency? I know what I think. I'll leave the rest of you to make your own mind up about that. The other thing that worries me a little is I've heard your very passionate plea, Trevor, but, you know, it comes down to, in my view, what is allowed under planning rules. And I can't really, looking at this report, see an awful lot of things which are contradicting planning rules. I know some people don't like caravans. Some people do like them. Some people think they have the right to a view. Well, we all know that isn't the case. I'm very happy to hang my hat on the rules that we have been taught to obey with regard to planning. So I think we should all take a step back, take a deep breath and think about that before we actually come to the vote. And I guess I might be a voice in the wilderness, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do myself, to be perfectly honest. But I think we need to bear those points in mind when we reach this important decision. Thank you, Chair.
Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Not wishing to put words into your mouth, Chair, but in terms of another reason potentially for refusal, I think that the sustainability of the site is an important reason. This site is only accessible realistically, it is only accessible by car. And that is in contravention of our planning policy. It may not in and of its own be enough to turn down the application, but in terms of added to other reasons, I think it's worthy of consideration.
Thank you. Any more comment, ladies and gentlemen?
Chair, could I
Yes,
address the committee on this application, because I sense this is going to be a difficult decision for you all. So we talk about this a lot at committee, but it's what is your development plan saying first and foremost about this application? And the great thing about Northumberland just right now today is that we've got lots of development plans. So we've got your ANIC plan, we've got the MPPF, and we've got the emerging Northumberland plan. And all of those policies are supporting this type of development. They want to support sustainable rural tourism and leisure developments, provided it respects the countryside. So, well, we can talk about that a little bit more, but your policies, all of them cumulatively together, are telling you to support this. That's how the plan is written. This includes caravans, camping, lodges, all of those sorts of things. I do think the design and look and thermal qualities of caravans today are a lot different to what they were 5 years or even 10 years ago. They're always improving. And if you're concerned about how the caravan itself looks like, we can do a little bit more work on, those reserved aspects of the scheme and bringing them out. But just to take it back to starting blocks, your plans support tourism of this nature and caravans in particular. So there's an overwhelming policy support for that. But you can take into account other material considerations. And that is the adverse visual impact and the cumulative impact of this development today. So what you're looking at is a small amount of caravans in addition to what is already there. So this is a little bit more of what is already going on there on that red line site owned by the applicant. What you've got to decide is, does that small increase in numbers, is that going to be a key material consideration in deciding to go against your strong policy support? Your policies are telling you to support this type of application. So is that little amount in comparative to the size of the site sufficient as a material consideration to go against what your policy says? We've also heard Councillor Thorne talking about the adverse impact visually and the proximity to the village. Well, again, you know, this is sustainable and how we interpret sustainability today. In terms of planning policy, it is adjacent to Swarland, which is considered a sustainable village centre. It might not have all of what you would expect a village centre to have today, but in terms of your plan and what your planning documents say, this is a sustainable location for this holiday park, and it is close to that. With respect to the impact on the landscape and the visual character, there is going to be a lot of screening, and that again is an option that you could think about with your conditions, is that you could add more screening or more buffers there so that the site continues to be enclosed and the impact lessened. So that's really all I wanted to say to you today, members, is, you know, don't lose sight of what your plan says here, how it supports this application, and that there are other material considerations that you can take into account, but are they sufficient on their own to go against what your plan is overwhelmingly in support of? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No one else? I'll just conclude. Now, as your chair, I am a planner. I've been a planner a long time. I love planning. I do. And I like order, and I like to plan. And what we're doing is we're planning the future of our villages and our towns. We're laying out a blueprint for them. But, you know, in the last couple of years, I think in certain areas we have lost control. We have. We've lost control. In my own village in Longfram, we've nearly doubled the size of the village. And is that planning? Well, to me, it isn't. Planning is some incremental increase that you would like to see to actually add to your village, not to swamp it, not to kill it off. And you see, I liken that to what we've got here at Percy Wood. And yes, I mentioned, started off at 15 caravans in a wood by Mr. Del Greco. And what have we got now? You know, nearly 400. 400. Is there never a point in your plan to say, come on, you know, is a caravan park of this size not going to have a detrimental effect on the little village of Swarland? I'm sure when Del Greco started off, he didn't think he would end up with, you know, a massive caravan park. It's big. I want to support rural businesses. I want to support tourism. I want these outfits to do well. But, you know, there is a point where you say, you know, it's big enough. It's going to swamp. It's going to starve the village of its services. And I feel that, you know, we've reached that here today. So, you know, I know it's a difficult one, but, you know, I seem to have lost one or two things in the past, and I just feel that there's always a point where you've got to say, you know, hey up, Percy Wood Caravan Park is big enough as it is, and if it gets any bigger, it's really going to spoil, you know, our nice village in Swarland. And I think, you know, we're at that stage now. But yes, I know it's a difficult one. you know, my colleague here, Liz Cinnamon, tells me, stick to your plan. Well, I think I am sticking to the plan. I want tourism to do well. I want Swollen to do well, but, you know, really, I feel this extra 60 static caravans is one step too far. And that's why I'm moving refusal today. So, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I've moved refusal. All those in favour of refusal today? And those against? And those abstentions? Thank you. That application is refused.
Mr. Chairman, would you permit me to seek some legal advice before we proceed? By virtue, and I'm looking at two other members of the committee, by virtue of my appointment to the Board of Advanced Northumberland through the council, I'm a director of Ascent Homes, so I need to leave for this. The application is from Ascent Homes. So do I, and I'm looking at Jeff and Guy as well. Yeah, do we need to leave for this?
Yes, you ordinarily would declare an interest in the...
Yeah, well, I declare a personal and prejudicial interest and I'll leave.
Chair, can I just say then, if I'm going to leave now, I might as well leave altogether because I have to leave at 4 o'clock anyway. So I'll just go and not come back. And some people will be pleased, I'm sure.
Want to leave now too, or highways?
James to stay.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue our second item on the agenda this afternoon. We've got a reserve matters application for access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. As has been said, it's from Ascent Homes and it's for land north and west of Hillcrest, East Road in Northumberland. And
Chair, can I just double check? We are quorum, aren't we?
We are.
We are that.
We need to be 5. And we are 5. And the officer presenting this afternoon is... Oh. Vivian.
Thank you, Chair.
Over to you.
I've got an update first of all. There's a change to condition 5. In the second paragraph of the condition, a figure of 40 is quoted, but that should read 30 because the scheme was amended. The application seeks approval of the reserve matters relating to outline application 1800828 out. The reserve matters that are being sought are means of access, appearance, scale, layout and landscaping. 30 dwellings in total would be provided on the site. I'll run you through a few of the slides here. You can see the application site outlined in red there. The access comes off Rotary Way. And you can see that the site wraps around an existing residential development. That's called Hillcrest, where they're predominantly bungalows. To the right of that, there's a farm with farm buildings and some farm cottages. Moving on to the next slide. Aerial photograph here, you see the arrow pointing to the site. You can see how it wraps around, see it clearer there, how it wraps around Hillcrest. And then to the right, you can see the farm, Rothbury Way to the north there. And then you see on the northern boundary, there's quite a lot of screening. Next slide, if I can get it to move on. There we go. The proposed site plan, so the grey line there is the access, which is going to come off Rothbury Way, obviously running through the site. 30 dwellings are proposed. They're 2 stories with a mixture of detached and semi-detached. The green area there, the dark green area to the west, that's open space. That's quite a steep part of the site, and there's no intention at the moment to develop that. And if you can see, there's 5 houses which jut out in to the southeast with red dots on them. That's just denoting the affordable housing. This is the landscaping plan, so you can see the existing landscaping on the northern boundary. You can see the open space, which is the pale green, and then the darker green is showing the additional planting that's proposed. Proposed site sections, just to give you an idea of how the dwellings are going to sit in relation to each other on the site. The site's generally flat where they're proposing to build the houses, but the open space area, as I've said, isn't. Just to run you through a series of what the units are going to look like. Again, they're a mixture of 2-storey, detached and semi-detached, going to be constructed of brick and render with concrete tiles. I'll just quickly take you through these. There's a few different types proposed. Okay, now we get to the photographs. So the first 3 photographs here showing the access. So the photo to the left, that's the access off Rothbury Way. The other 2 photographs are showing the existing field access, which will be upgraded, and they're the farm cottages that you can see there with the agricultural buildings beyond. Next photograph is within the site, taken from the northern boundary, looking south. Again, you can see the farm cottages there. Next one here is taken from the eastern part of the site, looking west. The middle photograph there, the houses that you can see, they're Hillcrest, the existing properties. And this is looking down towards the access. And the access would run down that boundary there. Ord Parish Council raised no objection to the development, subject to raising some points which are set out in the report. We've received 4 letters of objection from 2 properties. And the recommendation is to grant permission subject to the conditions set out in the report. Also thought would just be helpful to make members aware of the Section 106 contributions, which we secured at outline stage. So we've got 15% affordable housing, and that would be 5 discount market value units. We've got a health contribution of £17,400, an education contribution of £39,600, and a CMS contribution of £18,000. That's already secured in the Section 106, and there's no, we're not proposing to change that. That still stands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we've now got public speaking. And the first person to speak this afternoon is Councillor Isabel Hunter, the local county councillor. Isabel, you have 5 minutes on this application. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak as Ward Councillor on this application. This application should be considered against the NPPF and the emerging Northumberland local plan, as this will hopefully be adopted next week. Ord Parish Council and I welcome the 15% affordable housing. However, it's disappointing that the 5 identified houses will be discount market value houses. Yes, they will be 70% below market price. However, to many families, local families, these houses will still be unaffordable, as there is a reasonable number of local working residents on either part-time, seasonal work or on minimum or just above minimum wage. Ord Parish Council are concerned that if this application is approved, a variation application will be submitted to amend the number of houses to 40, which the Parish Council feel would be overdevelopment of the site. The A698 is a 60-mile-an-hour road, which is the main signposted road from the south into Berwick, as well as the access road to and from the trading estates. Ord Parish Council has asked if the speed limit on the A698 could be reduced even for a section from the roundabout heading west past the access to the development site. because the sightline from the development site to the right is not a clear sightline due to the curvature of the road, and the traffic are speeding up as they've just exited the 30-mile-an-hour limit. There's also an offset junction on the opposite side of the road, which leads to the local sewage works. Traffic waiting to access the development site heading east from the A1 could be stationed in the middle of the road due to oncoming traffic. East Ord Farm is still a working farm, which means farm traffic will be using the access road, which is also the public right-of-way. There's also a public right-of-way along the edge of the A698 from the roundabout, leading from the trading estate heading west to the access to the site, and a permissive right-of-way from the access west towards the A1. This is a popular, safe walking route for local residents. Ord Parish Council would like it if the committee are minded to approve the application, a condition to be included that there will be a management charge on all properties to cover the maintenance of the open space within the site for in perpetuity. Northumbria Water needs to address the current water supply in Berwick and the surrounding area. Yes, the treatment plant for our area, which is within the parish, has been upgraded. However, often water is tankered into Berwick Reservoir at the top of Sunnyside. The water supply is an issue on all new developments within Berwick and the surrounding area. Sustainable transport. The only bus service is the Galashiels 67 bus service, which goes through East Ord Village. The service is hourly from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, 2 hourly up to 6 p.m. to Berwick, and hourly 6:30 to 8:30 a.m., then 2 hourly up to 4:30, with the last bus leaving at 5:22 heading west. I support the development management. The garages are to be used for the sole purpose of parking vehicles in perpetuity. Councillors, I hope you will consider the points and comments I have raised before reaching a decision, and if you are minded to accepting officer's recommendation, I hope you will ensure appropriate conditions are attached to any approval notice. Thank you.
We have a speaker in support of the application. Lee Fulcher. Lee, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Lee Fulcher, Senior Planner at DPP Planning, the agents on the application, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant for the scheme, Ascend Homes. As you've seen in the officer's presentation, the application seeks approval of the reserve matters relating to the outline consent for residential development on the site. Those reserve matters are means of access, appearance, scale, layout and landscaping. The principle of a residential development on this site comprising 30 dwellings has already been established by the outline planning permission. In terms of benefits of the proposal, the scheme provides a mixture of dwelling types and housing mix to the local housing market, meeting a range of local needs. The proposed 30 dwellings will be delivered through 9 different house types, comprising detached and semi-detached styles. 5 of the dwellings, 15%, would be delivered as affordable housing, and these will be delivered, as the councillor said, as 70% of open market value as required by the council's affordable housing officer. Additionally, Section 106 agreement to secure coastal mitigation, healthcare and education contributions was signed and sealed as part of the outline planning permission, and these contributions will be delivered as part of the development. As part of the proposals, the applicant will upgrade the public right-of-way to a standard suitable for increased use resulting from the proposed development, and this will be done by formalising the existing shared surface arrangements by directing the main flow of traffic into the development site, the redesignation of the route from a footpath to a formal shared use cycle route, potentially as a formal cycle path or bridleway, the installation of new lighting columns between the existing provision and the new site access, and the removal of the pedestrian gate to increase accessibility for pushchairs, cyclists and less able-bodied users. Moreover, the site is situated within a sustainable and accessible location with frequent bus links to local destinations within Berwick and the surrounding area, as well as train services to Edinburgh and Newcastle and other destinations including Morpeth and Durham. The improvements to the public right-of-way will also increase the site's accessibility. In terms of sustainability credentials, the houses will be built using a fabric-first approach, and electric vehicle charging points will be provided in accordance with the Council's sustainability policies. The applicant will also provide 30 bird and bat box features across the development, as well as gaps in fences for hedgehogs and other wildlife and wildflower meadows as well, in order to facilitate biodiversity net gains. In summary, the proposed residential development will provide a boost to the housing supply in the area with a mixture of dwelling types appropriate to the location, including affordable housing. Throughout the determination of the application, the applicant has worked with the council's officers, namely highways and drainage, and submitted additional and revised information to address any issues sufficiently to enable them to recommend approval of the application, subject to conditions. The proposed development contributes to all three dimensions of sustainable development as outlined in the MPPF. Furthermore, the development is considered to be acceptable in the plan and balance when assessed against local and national policy and has an officer's recommendation for approval. Therefore, I would respectfully ask members of the Planning Committee to vote in favour of the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. It's really, there was a lot of information in Councillor Hunter's presentation, and so I hope I haven't picked this up wrong. Is the road past the access 60 miles an hour? Is that correct?
Yes, do you mean Rotary Way?
Yes.
My understanding is that it is, but we have got highways here who can probably give you a bit more information.
So sorry. It's only that, you know, my feeling would be it would be nice to have some kind of lower speed limit, something like 40 at least to go past there. So I would actually recommend that, but I know it's a question, so that's fine.
Can we ask our highways person to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. The access to the site has been designed to standards with the geometry in accordance with the speed of the road. It has been subject to a road safety audit as well, which didn't flag up any problems, any issues. And we have recommended that a stage 2 road safety audit is done when there's a more detailed design, just to double check.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mark, did you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. That was one of the questions I was going to ask. I think it's a really good forward-thinking suggestion from the parish councillors, just to see if that could be done.
Yeah. Do we think that's possible? I know we've had advice from our highways, but
there's two things here. That may be possible through the process that Sarah Jane's outlined in her response, but for the purposes of the application today, because you're dealing with the reserve matters, the highways matters have already been dealt with through the outline and part of the scheme, but it may well be picked up in the section in the second road safety audit, but it may not. And if it's not, and as a development starts to become habitable, that can be something that we, you know, that highways, the Highways Authority may be able to look at. But for the purposes of tonight, it's out with what you can decide tonight, because we're dealing with the reserve matters.
did you have another question, Mark? No. Georgina.
Thank you. It's just on one of Councillor Hunter's points, the issue about management of the communal land. I'm presuming that it is generally an important point to get these things right, because they are such a cause of conflict, and I've experienced this in my own place, where you need to be very clear and uniform and rules about these things, because it does cause conflict. But I don't imagine it's something of planning consideration.
I mean,
there's advice on that, Vivian?
Sorry, it's just, there's often a management company that's set up with residential estates, and they would manage it. It's not normally something that we would involve ourselves in. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? No? Someone like to move a recommendation? Is that seconded?
With the conditions, with the, I'm happy to second it with the, with the speed limit. Can we have that as a condition? No.
We can't add it as a condition, but
we can comment.
yes, a note to applicant or highways that we think this is a very good idea.
Yeah, but we'll make a note of that for the processes involved in dealing with the conditions that were attached to the highways works on the outline.
Great, because it is definitely is a safety issue there. And people not expecting it when it's new development, etc. But I'm happy to second, yeah.
So just to clarify, Chair, can I just check with Councillor Patterson? It's granted with the conditions in the report. Yeah.
Any other comments from anyone? Mark.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to stress that, like Councillor Hill said, that does need to be looked at as a speeding, and I hope that the applicant's agent sat here today will take that on board and factor that into covering the cost of that. Because time and time again, as a councillor, I've learned in not even a year yet that we constantly mop up problems from the planning process. Things being missed because of not listening to parish councillors and local members. So if both the parish council and the local member are sitting here saying that needs to be a 30, then that's what I fully support. And instead of the local member having to go and start and beg highways for some funds or use their own personal allowance to try and fund that, it should be funded by the applicant. So I really hope that that's taken back and taken on board with highways going forward, that if the parish council and local members put something, which I think is a really proactive, sensible, not asking for too much proposal, that it's taken on before we get to this point we're sat here today.
Thank you. No more comment? All those in favour of the application? Unanimous, 5 in favour. Yes, please.
Is this a good time for us to have a comfort break, or should we wait to the end?
And ladies and gentlemen of the committee, just 2 other items to comment on there. There's an appeal update report and a Section 106 agreements update report for information, both of those. And if you're happy to acknowledge those, I'll close the planning part of the meeting. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Do we want? I know myself and Guy have had a break, but do you want a 5-minute break, or shall we just continue?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Quick.
5. Okay. We'll 5 minutes. Right, we'll make a start. We move on to, thank you everyone for staying with us. We move on to item number 10 on the agenda, which is public question time, and I don't have anyone recorded as wanting to ask questions of the committee or the council. So we move straight on to item number 11, which is 11A, and that is to receive any new petitions. I am told by Rebecca that we have 3 petitions that have been submitted. Sorry, 2 petitions that have been submitted. Petition number 1 is to declare Berwick upon Tweed a smoke control area to reduce carbon emissions, I think.
The title was to declare Berwick upon Tweed a smoke control area to help mitigate against emissions.
Yep, to mitigate against emissions, and to extend the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in Berwick to help control air pollution. We have received those petitions. The lead petitioner is not here, but it will come back at a future committee meeting once we obviously have a response from officers and/or a report as well, if members are happy with that. 11B, consider any reports on petitions previously received. We have none, and the same is for item C. So we move straight on to item number 12, which is local service issues, and I hand over to Graham and Bob for this.
Thank you, Stephen. So, quick update from highways. So the surfacing gangs have now completed 30 of the 31 major resurfacing schemes in northern area. There's only Swansfield Park Road footpaths to complete, which is underway now. That will also mark the start of the 22-23 schemes, as Swansfield Park Road carriageway will follow straight on from that one. Since the last meeting, surfacing has been carried out at Rennington, Embleton and Sunnyside, Berwick. Away from the surfacing side, the construction gangs continue to deliver a wide range of schemes from the Integrated Transport Programme, ranging from minor traffic safety schemes up to major projects such as the Berwick Leisure Centre, which I'm sure you'll be pleased was recently completed. Northern areas leading on the motorhome pilot scheme at 3 car parks all up the coast at Beadnell, Bamborough and the Braid. We were given a very tight timescale to get that implemented, but the gangs are working furiously this week to meet the deadline. As always, we've got the highways inspectors and their response gangs out dealing with routine maintenance, such as repairing potholes, clearing gullies, replacing signs, etc. And as I've previously mentioned, the inspectors are having to cope with hundreds of complaints every month, which is making theirs and our lives quite difficult. Storm Arwen and Mallock recovery operation continues and looks likely to be ongoing for some time. Winter services coming to a close. Seems to have gone fairly well. Seems to have been a reasonably mild winter. And that's briefly what's going on in highways, although as always that just scratches the surface really. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Renner Thompson.
Sorry, what exactly is happening in the car park at Beadnell and Bamborough?
Oh, do you not know about this? The motorhome pilot.
Oh, sorry, yes. I missed what you said.
God, I thought you didn't know what was happening there.
Councillor Mather.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Graham. Couple of things. At the last meeting, I mentioned the concerns about the gritters being able to perform and losing signal. Thanks to Mitch, contacted me straight after the meeting and explained that things have improved and they've got the system up and working now. So I felt that I should mention that to this meeting that was chased up straight away. So thanks. You mentioned about the storm recovery. I do think, and I've mentioned it with a few people, and it just goes quiet, that as a council we need to be better educating landowners their responsibility to clear their own mess up.
I agree.
Because we've done a lot of emergency response from all the storms, and that was great. And we got the highways open, I felt, in a very respectable time. But still, I'm getting complaints about debris and brash. There's timber lying on the sides of roads that's going to stop. The verge moon coming into the spring, coming off private land. And when I've spoke to some private owners, they just don't realise what their responsibility is. So I don't know whether we can do something as a council and get some PR and press that just to put the information out there, this is your responsibilities, or even if you need help doing it, this is the number to ring. I feel we need to be...
Yeah, that would really help, Mark, if we could get something out as a council, because you're right, we're clearing up trees that have fallen from private land.
If I may interject, and then I'll bring Isabel in, it's not just that, it's the responsibility of landowners who have got trees that are leaning and look like they're coming down and potentially will restrict the public highway as a result. I'm thinking of one specific example where the landowner has been told that it needs to be addressed. Those trees are going to probably come down in the next 12 months, and it is going to block off the main road into the Coquet Valley if it's not dealt with. And then it's this council that gets shouted at, you need to get the road open. But I think some landowners are ignoring their responsibilities when it comes to maintaining trees and things that are on their land. So I support what Councillor Mather said there.
Or the worst thing happens, somebody gets killed.
Yeah.
I don't know who we tackle in the council to get some, whether it's allocation of money or to actually produce this document, or if we already have a document that just needs, I don't know where to go with that, but I do think that needs looked at. The gully wagons, have we got our new gully wagons out yet?
No, we haven't got them yet. I believe they're at Stakeford being set up for us.
Right. And is the gully wagon at Alnwick full-time still, or is it down to part-time?
The gully wagon at Alnwick is as full-time as it can be. It's 7 or 8 years old, and it spends more time in the garage than it does on the road.
Right.
So we can't wait to get one new one on the road.
Because we were given a report back at Scrutiny Committee, it was fairly new after I was elected, that the gully wagons were here. So I think, if we can stress that we need these, we need the right equipment in the hands of the people doing the job, and get that operational full time. That's everything. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the resurfacing of the road at Sunnyside between Councillor Hill and Ice Patch. And also thank you to the staff when I asked if we could have countdown markers marked on the road, which they're building into it. And there were, I know the scheme's not all, the painting's not been done yet, so they've built it in. So thank you to that. An issue that's been raised since Storm Arm, and I've emailed a couple of times without responses, and I know Councillor Hill has as well. There's a fence that's come down at the end of properties at the end of Cemetery Lane. And I don't think it's a county matter. Probably it is either the housing association or the private one. But there's a drop into the houses, and we keep getting contact saying, what happens if a car goes off the road, it's going to end up down there, and county's getting the blame for it. So if we could look into whether it's our responsibility to do anything or whether it is their owners. And I've got 20 mile an hour speed limit in Ivanson. The poles are up, but residents are asking when we're going to get a bit more than the poles, because there's no signage of that there yet.
Okay, I'll chase that up for you.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Just a quick comment and a quick question. Just have to say, I'm sure everyone is on the same page as me. When you get a resident's complaint about something or concern and you think, right, I need to go to, or if it's the police or the town council or whoever, when it's something for either of you guys, it's like, oh, good, because I know you'll get back quickly and do something. So it is always appreciated. And just one point, I have emailed us in the roundabout at the end of the new bridge. That's really badly faded now and it's dangerous. It's been mentioned quite a long time, but isn't it? Completely faded. So particularly tourists who won't know it's there. It can be. So next time the paint marking guys are there, I think it probably has to be a Sunday, doesn't it?
Probably does, but they're coming up to do Sunnyside next week, I think. Is that at the Mary Gate then?
No,
The other end,
Pet settlement.
pet settlement.
That one's probably paid. That was not fairly.
I've got Councillor Thorne.
Yes, Graham, I just wanted to thank you again for the help with Shillbottle, the new bus shelter at Shillbottle. Within 3 weeks, the locals had put a blowtorch through it and made a hole.
I saw that.
But within 6 weeks, they'd smashed all the perspex as well.
Yeah.
And in one regard, I just, think, let's leave it there. If this is what you want to do, took ages to get permission for that, and a lot of, a couple of trees come down and strengthening the little walls around, but so annoyed that, the improvement had just been there tiny time, and, they'd vandalised it. I was so upset, I was. But also, my river parking scheme, Riverside in Felton, again, that's taken ages to deliver, trying to get Felton to agree to the scheme, but it's in now. People aren't churning up the verge anymore, and it's really smart, and the locals are very happy. So, again, thank you for your help with that. Thank you.
If you need any help with the replacement of the perspex, we'll have contacts for that.
Well, that would be good. We'll have to replace the perspex, but I'd love just to leave it the way it was.
Councillor Swinbank.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things on white lines and yellow lines. I don't know whether this is in your control, Graham, but white lines in Bungate Without at the War Memorial and Prudder Street Junction, they were partially redone last year. They had to give up halfway through because of traffic, and it never got finished. But the other one is a WL line, which is a new WL line in Percy Terrace, which is been agreed, but the response I'm getting from whoever is that they don't know when it will be delivered. It's only about 30 metres of, probably less, of double yellow line, and it's obviously a safety issue with regard to parking of cars so that residents can get in and out, etc.
At Percy Terrace, did you
Percy
say?
Terrace, South Street Junction, it is. So any help with speeding that up would be really appreciated.
I'll find out if it's been issued, Mark. And I'll push it on.
And I've got a couple of things I'd like to raise, Graham. One is the entrance to the industrial estate in Rothbury. It's a hotly debated subject matter who is responsible for that. But if you look on the County Council maps, it past the Cars Billington warehouse and to basically the entrance to the Riverside caravan site, it is our responsibility, and it's been patched and patched and patched for years. If we could get it patched again, but I'll obviously speak to Dale about getting something in the LTP for a future year, but it is, I'm getting complaints from a number of the businesses about the entrance into there. And the other one, and I know and appreciate you don't have a budget for signs, but I'm getting complaints from the residents. There's only 3 or 4 residents there, but it's beyond Alwynton. It's when you go right up into the Coquet Valley, and you cross the bridge, and you can either carry on up the valley or you can take a sharp right, and it takes you to the properties at Shillmoor. It's a dead end, and it is difficult to turn down there, and the residents are having a lot of problems with, because obviously there's a lot of visitors going into the Coquet Valley. You'd be surprised how many, and if they're getting lost, they're causing problems for the farmer down there and the residents down there in terms of access. And some of them are just abandoning their cars in front of the properties as well. So if we can look to get a sign that just basically says it's a dead end, kind of no turning or something like that, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll speak to the Highways Programme team, Steve.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members? Bob, I'll move on to you next then, if there isn't.
Thanks, Chair. Similar to Graham, since the last area committee, we've experienced a little bit of milder weather. This has helped our teams recover some ground we lost on Storm Arwen and Mallock, and said that it's going to take a while to get on top of it because it was vast. We'll continue to work 28-hour week during the winter period, progress through scheduled work, has been a bit of a challenge, but successful. We're on target with the scheduled winter works. We've still got some areas to catch. I'm positive we'll get there. We're in the final stage of preparation for the up-and-coming grass cutting season. All grass cutting equipment is either being serviced or it's being serviced now, ready for the start. We'll be starting soon, and depending on the ground conditions, we should make a good start. Hopefully, with this, like I say, with the dry weather, we'll get a good run at that. Some areas have had a bit of attention already. We've made some changes to the routes in our area, in the Berwick area, and some outlying areas to try and increase a bit of the efficiency, operational side. We're in the final stages of recruiting the seasonal for the grounds maintenance positions. We control activities will be undertaken in-house again this year. We've been pretty successful the last couple of years, but it's always a problem, ongoing problem. We'll be using the blue dye again this year because it was quite popular and received some good positive comments pre-pandemic. The street cleansing side, mostly business as usual. We anticipate that the increase in footfall we experienced last year, hopefully it'll drop off a little bit. We should ease the pressure on our cleansing teams up and down the coast into the rural villages. We're going to take delivery of 2 new small sweepers, prison sweepers, so that should help. We've had a lot of downtime with the older ones. It's held up again because of parts from the pandemic and what the lead-in times has been affected. On the waste side, the residual and the recycling, business as usual again for the waste collection service. We're still elevated tonnages due to COVID, but we'll put this down to many people still working from home and generating waste rather than being at the workplace. Due to the rate of housing growth, recent years, the waste service will see an additional investment this year and will receive 2 additional RCVs to cope with that. Hoping that wherever they're placed, I think they'll be placed in Morpeth, southeast area. Hopefully we'll get the ripple effect and it'll be a county-wide adjustment on our routes to feel the benefit of that. Work is underway to evaluate the existing demands on the service, and we're going to plan the routes to ensure we deploy the uplift in the most efficient way possible. Garden waste collections have started. Increase in house and customer numbers have meant additional tweeting rounds have been required to accommodate the increase in trying to incorporate some further areas. Initial take-up for the service has been high. The scheme remains as popular as ever. That's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to use the chairman's prerogative. I've got 2 things for you, Bob. One is just to say thank you. I'm guessing it was someone in your team that fixed the sink in the public toilets on Bridge Street. They were
Yes.
it was ripped off the wall, I think.
It's a thank you to us.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And the other thing is, because I know it gets raised every year, particularly during the festive season, I'm going to keep raising it with you. Have we brought the glass recycling bins in from Morpeth and into the Alnwick area yet? Because that causes a problem, particularly at the festive season when, I mean, the car park is just unbelievable how many glass bottles there are.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's part of this ripple effect. So that's what we're going to be adjusting the rounds to incorporate that and take that bit of a ripple and use some of what these 2 new vehicles bring into the other areas. So I'm fully supportive of that. I want to get control of that, Stephen.
I've got Councillor Thorne.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for taking all the ivy and branches away from Longfram Cemetery. That was really good. But just remind you that I did ask if the hedge could be cut, sometimes the hedge at the bottom. Carlo and I have been out a couple of times collecting rubbish on the A1 and very grateful to Northumberland County Council for picking up the bags of rubbish.
You're going to get yourself knocked over one of these days, do you?
Oh, I'll wear Viz jacket.
Are there any other questions? No. Thank you very much for both coming along. We move on to item number 13, which is Northumbrian Music Partnership, to receive a presentation and an update on the Northumbrian Music Partnership. And we've got David Francis and Richard Johnston here from the Music Partnership. So I hand you over to you two gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 13, unlucky for some. I'm mindful that it's been quite a long meeting, so we're going to cut down the hour and a half we had planned, and we'll try and do it in about 10 minutes instead. So, yeah, thanks for allowing us to come along today and share some information about what we do, following a meeting with Councillor Hill a few weeks ago. So, basically, what we do is we try and help unlock the potential of children and young people in Northumberland through learning about music. And just to give a very quick example, that's not necessarily about learning to play the flute at grade 8 and go on and become a concert performer. I was at a school 2 weeks ago and I saw a piano lesson where a child came in very withdrawn and nervous, hardly spoke a word. And she sat down very timidly, played the piece, had some feedback from the teacher, and the performance got better and better and better through the lesson. And at one point, the teacher said to the student, after she'd played the piece a final time, she said, that was almost perfect. You could play that in a concert tomorrow if you wanted to. And the child grew about 2 inches in height. And I think it's that kind of, the non-musical stuff, you know, developing confidence and learning, you know, communication skills, tenacity, leadership in some cases. You know, it's about a lot more than just playing the notes on the page. Our mission statement's up there, which says we're committed to enriching the lives of all children and young people in Northumberland and Newcastle. I'll come back to that in a second, through engagement and participation in quality music activities. And it says all children and young people, and I think that's really important because there's a big focus on inclusion and you know, making sure that everyone can access these opportunities regardless of whereabouts in the area they live, or what school they go to, or what their household income is. So we're very keen to remove those barriers. What we do in practice, we mostly work in schools, but not entirely in schools. I'll give a bit more detail coming up. Essentially, we try and give the best possible service to as many people as we possibly can. And we have a team, quite a small team, about 22 music tutors, a mixture of full and part-time, and some freelancers as well, filling in gaps here and there. So yeah, a couple of pictures of children on there just to remind us why we do it all. So you can see examples there of kind of performance events with multiple schools, a couple of examples of sort of whole class music lessons that happen in schools, and you can see a choir there from Northumberland taking part in the Durham Vocal Festival a couple of years ago. The sort of origin of our organisation, if you like, our department, we sit under Northumberland County Council, and historically we grew out of what was the music service, which I was a pupil of many years ago. I think Richard probably was as well. And back in the glory days, it was possible to get free instrument lessons and free instrument provided for you to borrow, and you know, go along to orchestras and groups and ensembles, and everything was wonderful. And obviously over time, budgetary constraints have come in, and it's meant that there's been challenges basically to keep that going. So currently we don't get any direct funding from the local authority, but instead the work that we do is funded DFE money through Arts Council that then comes to us. And about 10 years ago, there was a review into music education, the so-called Henley Review, and there's a quote up there that says, "The best music education comes through partnership. No one teacher, performer, school, organisation, group or body has all of the requisite skills to deliver every part of a rounded music education to every child." So this is where music education hubs were formulated, and so we now sit in a hub with Newcastle, which is why Newcastle's mentioned in the mission statement. So we have our sort of counterparts in Newcastle City Council, and we're also a partner with Sage Gateshead, because obviously they provide access to, you know, high-scale performance opportunities and access to visiting musicians. So the Arts Council and DFE dictate the core and extension roles of music hubs, and this is the sort of meat of what we do day in, day out. So I'll just whiz through these really quickly. I'll not read the whole slides to you, but core role A is about making sure that all children have access to learning a musical instrument in a whole class setting. And that's a lot of what our tutors, a lot of what our tutors do every week is going into schools, delivering whole class music lessons, whether it's on ukulele or pocket trumpet or flute or singing or, a whole range of instruments. The second thing is providing opportunities for children to play in ensembles or groups and perform. And we do a lot of that both in schools and out of schools with children from various parts of the county coming together to play in groups. We have to ensure that progression routes are available and affordable for young people. So often that's children who maybe have done the whole class lessons, might come into a smaller group or an individual setting with a teacher. And we offer a remission scheme to sort of subsidise the lesson cost. And we provide free instrument hire to kind of remove that barrier of getting access to an instrument. Obviously, if you're learning to play the violin or the clarinet, just to get even a basic instrument can be quite pricey. So it gives children a chance to have a go at these things and see if they have an aptitude for it. And then to develop a singing strategy to ensure that every pupil sings regularly. And again, we do a lot of whole school singing. All of our tutors kind of embed singing into everything they do. We also offer professional development to school staff, and that's often, or especially at the primary school level, where at one time every primary school had it seemed to me like there'd be somebody in the corner playing the piano in assembly. Well, a lot of schools don't have access to staff with musical skills and experience anymore. And a lot of them lack a specialist teacher that can deliver music. So a lot of schools call on our staff to deliver, but also they call on us to provide training to school staff to empower them to deliver music in their own settings. We provide the instrument loan service, which, as I say, we've suspended all kind of loan fees for the last couple of years to remove that cost barrier. And finally, to provide access to kind of large scale or high quality experiences. And we'll come on to a couple of those in a second. So you'll see on the slide here, top left there is some children. Richard, which school is that? Do you know? Just put you on the spot.
That's the musical routes, which we run every year at Annick, where all schools come together in a garden and basically start their playing career. So it's getting them perform from the earliest point we can. So most of them have already been playing probably 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, and then bottom left, we've got some children playing at the at Woodhorn for the miners' picnic a couple of years ago. A couple of shots from Sage Gateshead there. People playing both on the concourse and in the main hall of Sage 1. And then bottom right, I think, is another musical roots and a garden photo. So some of the challenges that we've faced in recent years, obviously, as a service that relies on sending people into schools to deliver things face to face, and we generate income from that helps to pay for everything that we do. COVID-19 was a huge challenge because we still had our staffing overheads and we had no income coming in, or not very much income for several periods of time. What we did was we had to adapt and move to an online offer, which we did quite rapidly and with support and help from NCC to go through safeguarding stuff and things like that. And actually, those children that did access the online provision, the feedback was really positive. Parents were very appreciative of it. They said how important it was for keeping their children connected to something outside of the home and feeling like they were still continuing with their hobbies and interests. It gave them a different face to see when they were just homeschooling and all that kind of thing. And I think it from feedback we've had, it really helped with well-being and sort of mental health for children as well. And we've kept going with some online provision. We struggled a bit with communications at that time because a lot of children and parents get information about what we do from schools. And of course, schools were overwhelmed with trying to provide learning in a completely new way for their students. And so it was a bit of a mixed picture in terms of how well the message got out about our provision. And so I think there's pockets where certain schools were maybe better than others at passing on that information. And so we're currently trying to kind of develop a better strategy so we've got a direct link with parents rather than having to use a school as a go-between. One of the major challenges in a county the size of Northumberland is geography. We have quite a small team, as I said, 22-ish tutors plus a handful of freelancers. But if you are at school in whether it's Haltwhistle or Berwick, ideally we want all children to have the same opportunities. So if you want to learn the trumpet and you live in Berwick, and our nearest trumpet teacher lives in County Durham, that provides a challenge straight away. So again, I think the online provision is part of meeting that challenge, but also just looking a little bit more imaginatively at workforce. And so we've recently been in conversation with colleagues in Cumbria about whether there's scope for staff sharing at the west of the county. I don't know, Richard's in the process of trying to look at a similar thing with staff north of the border as well. One of the challenges, I think, is equality, diversity and inclusion. And again, that's about financial barriers and making sure that we remove those where possible. But also it's just making sure that we, we're able to reach anyone in Northumberland and provide something that's of benefit to them, regardless of what style of music they want to learn, what part of the county they live in, household income, all the rest of it. And one of the major challenges right now is Arts Council dropped on us a huge amount of additional work in order to access the funding going forward for 22-23. So we're in the thick of doing all the relevant business planning and financial documents that they require as well. So yeah, our next steps, we know which schools don't usually engage with us, or which schools haven't engaged with us for the last few years. So we're planning to reach out to those schools, make sure that they're aware of what we currently offer, but also undertake a level of consultation so we truly understand what they actually need, especially in a post-COVID environment, so that rather than just giving them what we've always given them, making sure that we give them something that is relevant and meets their needs. We're sort of in the process of reviewing our progression and ensemble offer. A lot of the groups that young people used to access, orchestras and things like that, the numbers really took a hit because of the best part of 2 years without being able to do those things in person. We did keep those groups going online, and I can certainly circulate round links to kind of some of the videos of the online concerts that we did. But the fact that we weren't able to deliver those communal experiences in person has meant that there's been some drop off in terms of numbers. So we're working to bring that back. We're working to update our singing strategy. And again, some schools I know were so cautious they didn't even let children sing happy birthday to each other during the height of the COVID pandemic. So we're trying to guide schools in how they can kind of reintroduce singing. We know that singing is actually a key thing, not just for musical development, but language development, socialization, etc., etc. And that's been something that, children have missed out on for, in some cases, nearly 2 years. We're looking to improve our secondary offer because we do a lot in primary schools, but we don't do as much in secondaries. And again, I think that's partly about understanding better what they actually need from us. Most secondary schools do have, good music specialists on their staff, which primaries don't always have. And it's just making sure that we've got something relevant to offer them. It's worth saying Ofsted expects all schools to work with the Music Education Hub. So just a favour, any of you, if you might be on boards of governors at schools, it's always worth you knowing that that Ofsted expects schools to work with us. We're trying to develop our SEND provision, and again, that's going back to the idea of all children and young people, whether they're at a mainstream school, whether they're in a special school setting, whether they're looked after children, whether they're, whatever, pupil referral units, just broadening the offer and making sure we've got something that fits the bill. As I mentioned, we've tried to develop our online and now hybrid offer, partly because of COVID-19, but also to overcome some of the geographical limitations. We're trying to build new partnerships with a wider range of organisations to help deliver on the core and extension roles, and finally keeping youth voice at the centre of what we do and making sure that what we do is accurately meeting the needs of children and young people and of schools, rather than just doing what we've always done because that's what we're used to doing. And I think we're all aware that there's the COVID-19 pandemic, none of us would have wanted it, but it's given us an ideal opportunity to try and redesign what we offer and make sure that what we do is fit for purpose and relevant. I haven't read any of my notes, which I spent ages preparing, but happy to take any questions that people might have.
Are there any questions from members? Councillor Patterson.
Well, Richard and David, you won't believe this, but I do a little newsletter for all of my parish councils, and I actually put in an article all about you, which I took from the council website. So I'm really pleased to see you both here. And it's such an interesting, if you like, concept. And, I think it's nice for us at the North Area Local Council to have you here and explain all of that, because a lot of people wouldn't know. I suppose, could you do a giant concert, you know, for all of the schools? Could you send out something to everyone? Because my granddaughter in Hertfordshire, that's what they did, and she absolutely loved it. It was such a wonderful day for them. I just think that would be something really special.
You can take that if you want, yeah.
We do some partnership concerts. So in Alnwick we do events called Musical Roots, which is a big event at the Alnwick Gardens. So we try and use support from local structures to do that. So that when we do a big concert, it depends. Rurality is the main problem, but we do look at, especially in Alnwick, trying to produce big, high-end musical performances and link schools together with performance. So we have done that in Alnwick, and we are looking at doing other areas. I think its main thing is it takes a lot of organisation, and we can't do that alone. I think we have to do a communication with a lot of bodies to make sure that happens. But yes, it is happening, but we are aware we do need to do more. I don't know whether David's got more.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the sort of thing that hasn't been able to happen in the normal way in the past couple of years. What has happened is, together with our colleagues in Newcastle, each year we run what they call the big gig, which is sort of what you described there, where children that play in their whole class lessons, you might be doing whole class ukuleles at a school in Annex, let's say, and you'll come together with schools from all over Northumberland and Newcastle, and take part in what they call the big gig. That happened online last year and is due to happen online again this year. But previously it used to happen in person. One of the difficulties with that is just access to venues that are large enough to cater for all of the students. So in Newcastle, for example, the venue that they've used for the big gig in the past is actually part of Northumbria University, but it's like a huge hall. And we've done stuff at City Hall in Newcastle before. We've done stuff at Sage Gateshead before. But obviously, for schools that are in the north of Northumberland or even the far west of Northumberland, they then have to factor in costs of buses and all that kind of thing. So we do offer the big, huge scale gig where, you know, any school can get involved from across the hub area, if you like. But for some schools, they prefer to do things in their school partnerships and clusters and, you know, work around our own Northumberland venues. So when COVID hit, we were planning to do one in Morpeth, for example, at the Leisure Centre in Morpeth. We've used the Leisure Centre in Cramlington before. We've done concerts at obviously the Alnwick Garden, but also the Alnwick Playhouse. But it's just when we've got 30 children, you know, classes of 30 from multiple schools, it's just finding a venue that's large enough to accommodate them all can be a challenge.
Well, I look forward to seeing you all at the arena in Newcastle.
Yeah, there might be a funding challenge with that, but we'll see what we can do.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Wendy, when you said you're not going to believe this, I thought you were going to say, a lot of people don't know, but I can play the flute and the guitar.
Unfortunately, I have no musical ability whatsoever.
No, I appreciate it, but yeah. Just to the background to this, at one of my surgeries, amongst all the chats about potholes and stuff, a resident who's really into music, Nick Elwood, he said he's passionate about music, and he's passionate particularly about classical and traditional music and giving young people the opportunity to play that. And said in this country there's often a strange kind of reverse snobbish attitude that you don't get anywhere else, which is against classical music in a way. So and he actually helped him organise last Saturday Music for Ukraine, and it was incredible. Just got these people that turned up who hadn't played together, and it was wonderful, you know. So he's a really good point, and he wants to sort of build up the contacts. And as ever, you always need somebody to do that, to build up the contacts. On that, and linking to what Wendy said about the big concert, is there, what sort of data is available? So, for example, obviously you couldn't say Johnny at Berwick Academy plays the flute, but could there be a snapshot to say at Berwick Academy we've got 2 flutists, 2 good at this level, just to get a feel? And then if people are looking to put a concert together, say, obviously without giving names and stuff, but what the music coverage and who's with a private tutor, do you have that data, or could we get that data?
Yes and no. So we certainly have data on everything that our own tutors deliver, and so it's easy enough at the push of a button. I don't know which button to push, but people that work with us do. It's easy to run a report and find out how many children playing each instrument at each school with one of our tutors. It's sometimes a bit trickier if some schools have freelancers going in privately that we don't necessarily deal with. So there might be things happening in schools that we only know about if they share that information with us. But certainly if people were looking for trying to coordinate, for example, a performance like the one you described, we've got good enough relationships with the schools that I think we'd be able to do our best to help and kind of act as a go-between if needed, or have our tutors work in partnership with other providers and freelancers if needed.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do, especially in the, because I look after the north end of the county, by the way. I work from, obviously, Rothbury, Morpeth, all the way up the coast to Berwick. One of the things we are trying to do is to engage schools, but engage them with local communities, what's actually creating what you would call mini music hubs in many ways. So in Berwick, I know Nick very well. And it is actually, we've started to try and have meetings once, probably once a term. It's not just based around the school, though. It's based about what infrastructure there is within that area. So in Alnwick, we engage with the Alnwick Music Society. We'll try, if they've got artists coming in, we can try and engage with them. We're encouraging them to join the meetings to create this hub. And I think also there is a creation of working with places like the Maltings, the Playhouse in Alnwick, local infrastructure, the Rothbury Music Festival, for example. All these things have to work together to support something. And I think that's something which I would like to see more of. I think that this, and it's just getting everybody on board to see a vision, to create a vision of something like that. And I think I totally agree with what Nick's saying about Ukraine. And if you can have to work towards something, it creates that inspiration of, yeah, let's create something to do that. I think that's very important for moving in the north end of the county anyway.
If I could just come in on that as well, I think one of the things that we've identified as part of our current business planning is a need to create a more comprehensive map of what's happening on our patch. So not just the stuff that we deliver, but what other organisations are doing, what other individuals are doing. I know Richard and myself both know in our heads that there's a community band that runs out of such and such a church hall, or an orchestra that rehearse at the Playhouse, or whatever it is. But trying to get all of that information pulled together in a way that if you're a parent or a child or an interested kind of member of the public and you want to know what there is in your area, if you play instrument X and you've only been playing for 6 months or you've been playing for 20 years, what is there out there that you can access? And as I say, whether that's provided by us or whether it's through an external organisation, just to get a better path through so people are able to access the opportunities that are available, and that we can act as, as a hub in the true sense. We're not trying to do everything ourselves, but we can help steer people towards the opportunities that are there. And obviously, probably shouldn't say this, but if there's somebody else that can do something out there that's great, that we don't have to worry about organising or paying for, that's fantastic. It's just joining the dots and making sure that people can get to what they need, really.
Sometimes they have like soothing classical music where there's areas where there's like hooliganism and stuff like that. I'm wondering if they should play classical music before council meeting.
The 1812 Overture. That's what we...
I don't know when the boom's coming on now.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Hunter.
Yeah, I think it's nice to know that it's part of Ofsted's expecting music in the schools, but again, it's a cost because it's something else that they've got to work into the budgets. As some of the school rules are fallen, especially in the younger schools, and but the other provision is if people want to join groups, sometimes the groups are not free, and I think it's how we can include them, that not everybody can afford extra. If they've got 2 or 3 of a family, it's all costly, and especially if they end up having to supply the instruments, because you haven't got a big bank of instruments that you can just say that if you want to come along, we'll give you X and Y. I think that's a difficult one as well.
Well, we actually do have a big bank of instruments, but it's a question of whether we might have 10 of something you don't want and none of something you do want, because it's all it's subject to availability. But we suspended the instrument hire fees at the very start of the COVID pandemic because we were worried about people, household incomes being stretched and people deciding to not continue with lessons because they were worried about paying for instrument hire when they weren't having lessons and all that. And we've kept that situation of not charging for the instrument hire because I think that is a barrier for some people, and especially with certain instruments, it's more expensive than others. I know you used to be able to get a ukulele in Aldi or Lidl for about £10, but you can't get a saxophone or a clarinet for £10. So yeah, we're very mindful about that. For the ensemble opportunities and group opportunities, some of them do have a fee attached to them, but we also have a sort of there's a charity that's been set up to help support the activities that we do. So if people want to access subsidised provision, they can do so by applying to the charity, who then have given out bursaries to help people with both instrument lessons and ensemble fees, and certainly through Arts Council's Cultural Recovery Fund funding that we accessed last year, we were able to set up a sort of a bursary scheme that was able to provide lessons for children from families that were experiencing difficult financial times. It's worth saying that it's not just households, with lower incomes that find that challenging, because if you're a family with several children and all of them want to learn an instrument, or you've got one child who wants to learn 2 or 3 different instruments, that can certainly add up. So we always try and work with families to, try and offer reductions where we can and point them in the direction of other sources of funding, like the charities.
I've got no one else indicating to speak. So I'd like to thank you both very much for the presentation. One of the biggest regrets of my life is not taking up a musical instrument. But if you'd seen me at school, I can't read music. I have no pitch. But I always used to make sure that I was when it came to group work, that I was always in a group with people that could play musical instruments. And there was myself and Councillor Thorne's nephew who were in the same boat, and we always ended up with the 2 triangles, and we banged those triangles like we were part of the London Philharmonic. But I cannot play a musical instrument, but thank you both for coming along, because it is evidently something that you're both very passionate about, so it's been fantastic to hear from you today. So thank you. Okay, we move on to item number 14, and it is to note the members' local improvement schemes, which is on page 95 of your agenda. We're also noting item number 50. Yeah?
Reuben Morgan is retired, so who's in charge of the local members' schemes now?
Is it Sarah Hudson? She's been sending some of the details, I think. I think it's Sarah. Yeah, she's always had a role, but I think there's another person in there as well. I think there's another guy, but Sarah's definitely one, I think, that's part of Reuben's team.
Grand.
Item number 15, we're noting the local area work programme on page 123. I have no urgent business, and the date of the next meeting is the 21st of April, and Rebecca has reliably informed me that it will be in Alnwick. So, yeah. I believe the following meeting, Rebecca is heading up to Berwick, also in between, to look at sites for a possible meeting in Berwick as well. So, yeah. So that is the date of the next meeting. I have nothing else on the agenda, so can I thank you all for coming along, and I hope you have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.